The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson is the first novel in the Stormlight Archive. It's one of my all-time favorite Cosmere books and is probably one of the strongest entries to a long-running fantasy series I've ever read. I absolutely love the book and I can't wait to get to my next reread. So why don't we look at some of the negative reviews this book has gotten and react to them, shall we? I did the same thing for Mistborn's first book, The Final Empire, so if you'd like to see that video, I recommend checking it out. Just like last time, this video is unplanned, unscripted and very relaxed, which is a bit of a deviation from my normal style, but I hope you'll enjoy it nonetheless. Anyway, let's get started with review number 1. So Ryan Smith here says it's unbearable mediocrity. He says, a good friend recommended this to me, so I gave it a shot. The writing is bland and the book is seemingly endless with no apparent payoff. I made it to page 500 before giving up. This may be the most mediocre, lifeless book I've ever read. Okay, so on one hand, I want to give him, props for actually making it to page 500, which it's not near the end of the book, but it's, a decent length in. On the other hand, and I will stand by this, from my previous video, I do not think, and I will never think, that one should review a product if you have not actually properly given that product a chance. So, if it's a book, finish the damn book. If it's a TV series, finish the TV series. If it's a movie, watch the whole movie. Whenever you review any sort of media, any type of entertainment, you owe it to the creator and to the potential viewers, readers, or whatever of that piece of media to actually finish it, to take it from beginning to end. A lot of times this is because, especially with books, the latter half of the book or even the last quarter of the book could be where all the action happens, but the build-up of the previous 3 quarters could absolutely be necessary. And quite honestly, with Brandon Sanderson, that's generally the case. The Sanderlange is a meme in the community for a reason. He has slow-burning books that basically not a lot happens in up until the very last quarter, and then the things start happening, which makes all the previous drudgery worth it. Okay, I call it drudgery. It really doesn't feel like it if you're into Sanderson, but I can see how it would if you're not. But at the same time, you wouldn't know this if you don't actually finish the book. That's my main criticism with this review. I would say, congratulations on making it quite a distance in, but don't review it if you haven't finished it. Also, he says the writing is bland, which I don't agree with, but I think that comes down to pure taste. Alright, let's get to the next one. This one's a bit longer. Girly M asks, how did this get published? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will pick out a few of the most pertinent parts here. So Girly M makes 4 major points here, so let's go through them point by point. Firstly, she says, and I'm going to assume it's a she, but she says that there are few rules to Sanderson's magical world, making the actions and their consequences like picking a number out of a hat. How handy that the main characters all have some sort of power that work at the time they need it the most. Except they had no idea where it came from and spent hours upon hours blabbing about them, contemplating them, blah blah blah. Alright, so I don't agree with the sentiment here. Like, yes, it does happen that conveniently these main characters all have powers, but from my perspective, I always considered it that it's not that these random people just happen to have powers, more that these people were gonna get powers anyway, and we're basically watching them acquire it. They were gonna become Radiants anyway, and we are now just seeing that process happen. And of course they wouldn't have any idea where it comes from. It's explained in the text that the Radiants fell ages ago. None of them actually know how this works. Sanderson has multiple times said that he's always been drawn to the idea of magic returning to the world, magic having been gone for centuries or millennia and now it's finally returning. And that was one of the main seeds of an idea that spawned the Knights Radiant in his mind before he ever wrote this book. So that's the whole point of them not knowing where the magic comes from. And at the next point, this is where I realized that Girly M, just like the other reviewer, never finished the actual book. Or at the very least didn't read much into exactly what was happening here, because Girly M says, Spren, oh Spren, the things that make no sense and hold literally no relevance to the story. I'm sorry, what? But did you not see that the Spren actually causes the powers? Like, did you not realize that Syl is a Spren and she is linked to the radiant abilities that Kaladin has? I'm not, was that not explain? I don't know. Like, maybe you guys can help me in the comments, but in my opinion, that was kind of obvious. Like, in the beginning of the book, sure, it just feels like a bit of extra world building, but by the time you get to the end, I mean, it's kind of obvious that there's a lot more to the Spren than you thought. Then point number 3, she says, death. How many times does the character have to contemplate death and their purpose in the course of a 1,000+ page book? Well, about 74.5% of the novel, by golly. Zero growth, so many problems that aren't problems. If I'd written this book myself, I likely would have gotten rid, aka killed the characters within the first 50 pages. They were that annoying. Okay, so I'm going to ascribe this to basically the slow, very, very slow pacing of The Way of Kings. The book starts out extremely slow, and it's even slower around about halfway through the book. And a lot of that time is spent with Kaladin just, contemplating this deep suicidal thoughts that he's having. And yes, that can be quite tedious, but Brandon has actually really improved since the last time he did this. The previous time he did this was with Sayzed in the final Mistborn book, but he's really improved. With this time, I didn't actually feel like, the story was dragging as much, and Kaladin actually had things to do while still dealing with his suicidal thoughts. That's the thing with Brandon Sanderson, and something I think a lot of readers don't enjoy is that he will delve deeply into, mental health issues and how people deal with them, and some people just don't enjoy reading about that, which, is fair enough. Though I wouldn't say it's necessarily something I would count against the book, it's really just down to personal taste. And then Girly M says, Stormlight, so bright and with nearly zero relevance to the plot besides giving the characters more powers they don't need. Well, it actually doesn't give them powers. If you'd read the book, you'd know it powers their abilities. It actually fuels it, but whatever. So, okay, let's just say that Stormlight didn't have any relevance to the Radiant abilities. Why would that be an issue? In my opinion, it's basically just, extra world building in that case. I don't know, it's almost like this reviewer has an issue with world building. I don't know, maybe some people just like bland fantasy stories with generic worlds and two-dimensional landscapes, I don't know. Anyway, I've spent way too long on this one, let's move on to the next one. This reviewer says, this book is a yawn factory. Boring world, boring characters, boring writing. Some of the concepts are downright ridiculous, even for fantasy, Safe Hands, Spren, or poorly explained, shard stuff, Stormlight. Sanderson rambles through 1,200 pages, and you'd think that at some point something would happen, but not really. Kaladin's angsty level 20 spearman shtick gets old incredibly fast. Shallan is unbearable. Dalinar is yawn. Skip this book and this series and find something that won't put you into a coma. Okay, so clearly a lot of people have issues with the world building in these books, which to me is just odd. Isn't that what you're kind of signing up for when you get an epic fantasy book? When you get a book that's 1,200 pages thick and it's labeled as epic fantasy, why are you complaining about world building? I don't know. Look, I'm not gonna keep harping on this point. It just seems a bit odd to me that a lot of these reviewers are saying the same thing, but that's kind of what you signed up for. I don't know. He says also that, shard stuff and Stormlight is poorly explained. I would rather say Brandon only partially explained it. It's not that it's poorly explained, it's just that at that point Brandon didn't want to give us all the information because it's something that the characters are gradually learning about as well. It's kind of pointless if we know all the information and they don't. Though I do have to say, I really enjoyed the line, Kaladin's angsty level 20 spearman shtick gets old incredibly fast. That was pure comedy gold. I love it. Just really funny. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. This next review says, it bounces from present to the past way too much, made it confusing, had a hard time getting a grasp of the plot, never was sure whether I was at present or in the past, took forever to get an idea where the book was going, never had me wanting to read more to see what was going to happen. And for the first time, I think we found an actual genuine review here, or rather one that's actually understandable. Look, I understand that Brandon really likes his flashbacks in this series, and we long-time fans of the series, people who've actually read all the books, we've kind of accepted it. Every book will have flashback scenes, and there'll be quite a lot of them in the book. But for a new reader, I can definitely see how that would be frustrating, confusing, and could stretch the plot out way too long. yes, these flashback scenes are crucial to understanding these characters and seeing their growth. It can also be quite boring for people who really don't like flashback scenes and who don't like being pulled out of the action of the current story to read about something that happened years ago. I do think that Brandon got a lot better at doing this as of Oathbringer, but in Way of Kings it can definitely add to the slow plot. This next one says, I am 1/4 of the way into the book and I can't read it anymore. Okay, that's it. I'm not reading the rest. I'm skipping this review. I am tired of these damn people not reading the book, but reviewing it anyway. It's just not right. I'm gonna rage. This next one says, easily one of the worst fantasy books I've ever read. Terrible dialogue, shallow characters, juvenile writing. The Fellowship of the Ring has a lower rating here than Way of Kings, and I find that terribly depressing. The entire Lord of the Rings trilogy is about the same length of this book and tells a full story, builds a world, and resolves itself satisfactorily. The Way of Kings doesn't get interesting until 800 pages in, and is essentially a prelude for more of the same. Not sure what I can say that other reviewers haven't said more articulately and in greater detail. I'm immensely disappointed that this book is considered a shining example of modern fantasy. Okay, so this person, Matt McIlvride, I'm not sure if I'm reading that right. Anyway, this person says that it has terrible dialogue. I disagree, but I think that's down to taste. Shallow characters. I disagree, and I think you're objectively wrong. And juvenile writing. I still disagree with this, but I can also understand a lot of people's issues with modern fantasy and Brandon Sanderson's writing style. If you've seen any of my reviews of his books, you'll know I'm not a fan of Brandon's prose, but I overlook that because everything else is done so well. Then this person goes on to say that, oh, this book is long and another classic fantasy series fits into this one book and resolves itself. Therefore, this book is bad. What? What kind of logic is that? That's like me saying, oh, here's a short story, it fits into the first Harry Potter book 3 times over, and it resolves itself, so thus it is better. What? This is the first of a 10-part epic fantasy series. The first of multiple large installments. So, obviously, it wouldn't resolve itself just yet. I mean, I know you're saying that it doesn't get interesting until 800 pages in, which is correct. But you say it's essentially a prelude for more of the same. And I would disagree. I think things really pick up around about midway through Words of Radiance. But I guess this person didn't bother to actually read that book, so I don't know. Anyway, I'm kind of getting triggered by all these reviews a lot more than in my previous video. But I'm a huge fan, so I don't care. I will share my opinions, damn it. Alright, next one. Caleb rated it a 1 star and says, over 1,200, I assume he means pages, so long, and it just kept going and going. I'd love to know how it turns out for Kaladin, but it took so long to get through this book that I have no desire to read more. Okay, so you didn't finish it. Why? Why are there so many of these? Why do so many people read a book halfway through and then decide, you know what, not for me, but I'm going to tell the whole world it's a shit book? What? Calm yourself, calm yourself. Let's go on to the next one. Oh, finally, we get a review that is someone who actually gave the book a proper chance, and they give legitimate criticism while also understanding it's just something that's not for them. Diane says that the book is extremely long, which it is, and over halfway through, absolutely nothing had happened, which admittedly is true. Not a lot happens up until like near the end. But she also says that she has no doubt that things will happen eventually, but she can't persevere any longer. She needs activity and action, and this book just didn't do it for her. Which is an absolutely valid thing to say. What's not valid to say is that the book is trash because it doesn't fit your specific tastes. Diane also says that the world building is great and that she could immerse herself, but she just can't do so through such a slow-paced book. Perhaps one day she'll pick it up again, but for now, she'll end by saying that she's sure it's a good book, but not one she particularly enjoyed. Well done, Diane. I'm really proud of you for actually putting a proper review out there amongst all this. Ugh. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this one is really triggering me, and I'm trying not to just rage, but Dominic says that the main hero is a Superman. No? Kaladin, like, nearly dies a couple times? What? Okay. That's just the first sentence. let's continue. And Dominic also says that the book is very slow, doesn't feel anything for the character, it's a slog. You know, I can understand that. A lot of people have these same criticisms. They didn't really like the slow pace, didn't like the characters, whatever. But then Dominic says, I skipped whole chapters of the book and I missed nothing. Nothing at all. That's how much story and character progression there is in a 1 million pages long book. I can appreciate the hyperbole of the last sentence, but are you kidding me? You skipped whole chapters and you say you missed nothing. Then how do you know if you missed anything if you didn't read those chapters? Like, I get it. You skip and generally not much has changed for the character. But can you imagine reading The Way of Kings and skipping the honor chasm scene? The scene where Kaladin nearly jumps and kills himself. Or imagine skipping the scene where Amaram betrays Dalinar. Or skipping the scene where Kaladin finally breaks through to the bridgemen and gets them on his side. Imagine skipping some of these crucial scenes, not realizing how important they are to the story, but because the larger picture or the setting didn't change, you're like, nothing happened. Are you kidding me? And then you have the audacity to say it's trash, don't waste your time with this. What? It's not trash. My God, it's not trash. Just read the book. Read the whole book. Give it a proper chance. Just give it some time. Read the whole thing. If you still didn't like it, make a review that says it's not for you or you had these issues with it. But to skip chunks of the book and then criticize, this one actually pisses me off a lot more than the people who just didn't finish it. And I don't know why. Because it's essentially the same thing, except, I don't know, it's just worse somehow. I can't even imagine skipping a paragraph, but now you want to skip a chapter? What? Triggered Raven is triggered. Let's move on. This next one is one where I want to say the reviewer is quite measured in their response and they're giving a proper response. They're saying, you know, it's not for them, etc., and they can understand that other people enjoy it. But then you read it and you realize that they say that because they don't read fantasy, but it's probably a good fantasy book. Then why did you rate it? Imagine a movie critic who never watches horror movies, rates a horror movie 1 out of 5 and says, it's probably a good horror movie, but I never watch horror, so for horror enjoyers, yeah, it's probably good, but for me, nah, it's a 1 out of 5. But then, if it's not for you, if you're not the target audience, if you don't enjoy the genre, then I can understand wanting to, you know, try it out. But if you get 200 pages in, like she says she did, and realize it wasn't for her, then put it down and don't review it. Why are you reviewing a book that you didn't finish? Scratch that. Why are you reviewing a book in a genre you don't enjoy, then giving it a poor rating because it's something you don't enjoy? Duh! Of course you're not going to enjoy it. It's not a genre you read. I'm at a loss. I don't know what to say. It just stumps me because, you know, I do this on YouTube. I review books. But imagine me picking up a romance book, and I do not read romance. For personal reasons. You can enjoy it. That's fine. But I do not read romance. And imagine I were to read a romance book and say, it's probably a good romance book, but because I don't enjoy romance, I'm giving it a 1 out of 5. What? That's just dumb. And I'm not ashamed of calling you dumb for doing this. You should not be reviewing anything with that criteria. You should not be reviewing anything if you didn't finish it, and if you're not the intended audience, you should not give it a poor rating just because it wasn't something you enjoyed. Because obviously you wouldn't enjoy it. Anyway, this has been going on for way too long. I think I'm done. These comments and reviews are just giving me a headache, and I kind of just want to go lie down now, so I'm going to call it there, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. That's been all from me for today. My name has been Raven, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.